Greetings, Internet. Welcome to Aaron Plays. In this episode, I will be doing the continuation of my activation of von Bülow's Fourth Corps in the third scenario of the 1815 Fallen Eagles by Hexasim. So we got to the point where it was the French defensive fire. I sent off the file, because I'm playing this by email with Mark. I sent off the file to Mark. He resolved his defensive fire, sent it back. I then completed the rest of the turn, or the activation for von Bülow, pass it back to him for his first activation, and then resolved all the defensive fire. So this log, or this particular episode, will complete with the end of the French first activation. So let's see what happens. The first thing we need to show is the correction that was required. Mark did send in his on his email that I advanced these units, the infantry, in those two hexes, one hex too far. I treated this as a road, giving myself an extra movement point, whereas in fact there are no roads on this map. These are all trails. So I'd placed that infantry in that hex, and the infantry in that hex, which is incorrect. So I've moved them back before we actually get into Mark's defensive fire. So as I said in the prior episode, both Mark and myself, we've played all of the way through the Austerlitz game, but that was over a year ago. So we're a little bit rusty in the rules. I mean, there has been a rules update since we last played, but I mean, that's minor. It's mainly too many games that we play, slightly similar, so it's relearning. And also, yeah, that I thought treat that as a road. So anyway, so defensive fire. So as he's written, I'm going to read exactly what he writes, because he writes a narrative of what's going on. So he's gone French defensive fire. I'll begin with Moutan with the 84th line. So looking at this hex here. So it's okay. With the 84th line, it's a straight roll against the assaulting Prussians. So that's that hex there. And we're using Axe to roll the dice, which is the automated card tracking system by Warhorse Simulations. Very useful if you play with card-based games, but we're using it purely for the die roller because we both don't like the VASSAL dice. And as I say, I'm stepping through the log here. So he actually highlights it as well. So they rolled an 8, which is no effect. Now, the actual fire table, there are two. There's an infantry fire table and an artillery fire table. For an infantry result, which that it was looking for, he was needing a 5. For artillery, it's a 7 or less. Low numbers are good in this system. So he says, now on to the main assault. They don't call it the Prussian Steamroller for nothing, which is true. Coming in with quite a lot of strength. Okay, so he highlights that unit. The French battery will concentrate fire on the enemy cavalry charge led by Blücher. DRMs are -1 for adjacent, that's true, and +1 for upslope, which is also true. Okay, for a net 0, it's a straight roll. They roll an 8 as well for no effect, which I was quite thankful of. And then he went back to you. So that means that we might log to actually begin the assaults. So let's begin with the big assault. Led by Blücher and the cavalry. The lead unit will be the one that's stacked with Blücher. If I want to get his benefit and bonus. So I'll declare it as the 1st, 2nd Pomeranian Landwehr Cavalry. Great unit. Look at that troop quality. 6. Okay. Clearing all those melee combat markers off. So 77 attacking factors, which is versus 20. So adding all the strength up from these units equals to 77 versus the 20 there. The artillery doesn't add to the defense value of the hex. So there's 20 step points of infantry. And the artillery, if it was on its own, would be worth 1 point. If it's as it's stacked with infantry, it's worth no points. So it's 77, which makes a 3-to-1, which on the actual melee charts equates to -3. Remembering those good. They've also encircled the defender because there's units attacking from 2 opposite sides. Or if I had 3 non-connected sides attacking, which I don't, but there's 3 non. So that's an additional -2. Hence the point for this cheeky little cavalry unit. What I was also thinking, which turned out to be incorrect thought, is creating a zone of control in there. Units in towns do not create zones of control. Duh. Thought I was cutting his retreat path off. I wasn't. Is he going to retreat? We shall see. Mark also at this point made a now I went through all the assault, went and resolved it, sent it back to him, and he actually changed the result slightly because he misinterpreted one of the rules which says Anglo-Allied cannot attack with more than 20 steps. Well, Prussians, as I point out to him, aren't classed as Anglo-Allied. That's the troops under Wellington's command. So Prussians aren't Anglo-Allied and can have up to 30 stacking points in a hex, and they all count for the attack, unless you're attacking into said towns, woods, difficult terrain, and such forth. This is in the open, baby. So, so I get the -2 for encircling. What I forgot to, as I said, this is the rustiness. So, is the troop qualities. So, Mark's troop quality there, it again takes the lead unit, which is the one on the top of the stack, which is 7. My lead unit is the cavalry, which is 6, so that's 1 less, but Blucher adds his combat value, so he's adding 2. So that actually takes me to 1 more. So it gives me an additional -1. So that'd be net -6, but the maximum I could get anyway is -5. You can't get any more than that, no matter what other modifiers you get, terrain, etc. There are no terrain modifiers. I then sent off the that information to Axe. It resolved the roll, and I rolled an 8, which with a -5 equals a 3. So that equals to what's called a QFT 1 plus R. Now, what that actually means is a troop quality test is made on the French unit or units with a +1 modifier, so to the worst. And an R is all the units in the stack will be reduced. Now, if I hadn't have had the strength that Mark said I didn't have, that would have changed to only a QFT 1. So quite important that I emphasize that. Anyway, so it's a QFT 1 plus R. The QFT is always resolved first. So you get, because units when they reduce, the QFT drops. So you always do the test first. So he needs a 6 to pass. If he rolls more than 2 higher, they rout. And so it was a roll of a 6, which becomes with a +1, 7. So they pass. So they don't rout, they don't retreat, they actually stand. But as I said, all units reduced, so they stood and bled, holding their ground. I then mentioned in the log that I'd forgotten about the troop quality, but it didn't matter anyway. So now on to the second attack, which is from here to here. Again, attacking with 30, which he said should have been only 20, but we corrected that to 19. So it's 3-2, which the troop qualities are the same. Looking at that hex, French is 7, with Mouton making it 8. The Prussians are 7, with von Bülow making it 8. Troop quality is the same, so net -1 for the odds. So this was a bit more risky attack. So, but I rolled a 5, which becomes a 4, which was just literally an R. They are all reduced. So again, the French bleed. As I typed there, you hold but bleed. That's put into the text there. So there is no end of turn die roll, because that was what will be the next step now, because all units get all activations. So I said I'll tidy up. So I removed all the melee counters, which I found that you don't need now. I should have marked the first corps as activate. You can see they've got that border on them. I just found the activation button. So yeah, that was me. Okay. And that was me done at the end of my turn. So we'll be going on to the French activation. So Mark sent the log back. He actually interceded partway through my turn and restored those units to strength, did a morale check on them, which wasn't required after the result, which was an R, but he said that I could only attack with a maximum of 20 per hex. So it was a 1-to-1. Well, I sent him a quick text and correct him, and he went, oh yeah, of course. And again, that was down to Russians. So I'll leave them at full strength for the moment until I join in on this log and correct. So he's written there, okay, on to the French response after the first mass Prussian assault. Gulp. Okay, it has to be Morton, needs a 9 or less. So to activate a formation, you must roll their quality, initiative number. Yeah, that's what it's called. And he gets a 9, so he activates Morton. He's reeling from the Prussian attack, gives his head a shake, and sends his aides out with orders to his corps. So as I say, Mark does like to create a narrative in these things, which is nice, helps with this. So the offensive fire segment follows. Have to think carefully. My eyesight's not brilliant about this, as any unit that fires will severely affect the movement of other troops through or out of the hex by +3, as I showed in the previous when I did my offensive fire. So I'll begin with the reduced battery, firing at the 15th Infantry Regiment. So he highlights the units that are firing. +1 for less than 4 battery size. It's a reduced battery. So any with less than 4 factors, there is a +1 modifier. And -1 for being adjacent. So close range. So net 0 DRMs. A 3 is rolled. That's a good roll. Remember, low is good. For QFT2, so that's a troop quality check. 2 with 1 step loss. That's not nice. 3 is rolled. Get 1 step, rather than in the melee where you get reduced for the whole stack. So my top unit in the stack must take the test, which is the 15th Infantry, as a 7. So it's got +2 on the dice. So it's 8. So the QFT roll is 8 + 2. So the roll was an 8. Adding 2 is a 10, which is more than 2 greater than their current value. So the route. So step loss is taken on my lead unit, and then he routes them. Okay, initial route is always 3 hexes, no matter what the movement value is on them. A route is 3 hexes moving towards the line of supply. So on this, bring it up. That's my line of supply. So he didn't quite do that correctly. I think he will correct it. I just checked for their supply hex. I believe it to be the Black Star under the reinforcement course to the far north. So I'll redirect them. 1, 2, 3. Okay. The firing hex is now marked as fired. Next, the 84th line under Mouton will fire at the 18th Infantry Regiment under von Bülow. Again, no DRMs. They're on 8 as well for no effect. Now marking the hex as fired, as you can see. No further French offensive fire. Onto the movement segment. So he's highlighted which hex he's moving from. The battered 1/8 battery and the supporting infantry retire into Plancenoit. No enemy zone of control is exerted into the hex, hence it's a legal move. That was a little mistake I'd made, and I mentioned it earlier in this episode. Like, note that although it costs 3 movement points to move out of the fired hex, a 1 hex move is always possible as long as it's not into a prohibited terrain. So it did say +3 movement. The artillery's only got 2. So yeah, that's a legal move because you can always move 1 hex as long as it's not, as he says, prohibited terrain. Now, these units. Now, all it costs, you've done that, the 84th line to join them. Okay, remember that unit, the 84th line, I will reduce because it did take a step loss, but I'll wait until my next log. That gives the French 19 SPs plus a small battery in the heart of the village. Next, there's a cavalry charge by the 4th, 9th, and 12th Chasseurs into the flank of von Bülow's 18th Infantry. So now they begin the charge with 8 SPs, halved to 4 for preparation. So yes, if you charge distance, you charge more than half your movement value, it can't be prepared charge, but this is a prepared charge. So this could be nasty. Prepared charge into the flank of the infantry. So the question is, how do we know it's into the flank? Well, this is where Marcus started to discover some of the things on the counters you can do if you do the right click. Remember, I was looking for the assault markers and getting them to turn. Well, Mark found them. And also the little P on the counter, if you look at it carefully, shows that it's a prepared charge. And the F shows it's flanking. So to answer the question, how do we know it's a flanking charge? If the target started the activation adjacent to an enemy infantry unit, which it does, the cavalry are classed as a flanking charge. It's viewed, there's no facing on these counters. It takes it the 1 step above that level. But what it's saying is, as my infantry are heavily engaged with Mouton's infantry, because they started in the zone of control, the cavalry, when they come in, as long as they didn't start adjacent, are classed as a flanking charge. The benefit of flanking charge is these units will count double their stacking points for odds ratio, and also any morale check my guys have got to take here will be at, no, so there's no modifier. If they fail, it's an instant rout. So that's quite dangerous. Continuing. So he then goes on about how to do the showing the markings and the charging and such forth, which is good. And Mouton moves over to lead the charge. So he just says a note here that leaders may move from enemy zone of control to enemy zone of control only if they have a join a friendly unit and they expend all movement points in doing so. Oh, that's a 1 hex move, so that's allowed. And then he continues to do his movement through You've got to remember that this unit will be reduced in strength when it comes to my log. 4 moving points and stayed 5 hexes from G. Yeah, he's got to, because as this is his order hex for Mouton's Corps, he can't move further away than what they started from. So they either got to remain the same distance or move closer. And the rest of the French continue their move. And again, there's artillery can't move into an enemy zone of control, but as there's no zone of control in that hex, because of my cavalry thinking that they are in a zone of control, that move is legal. Because artillery normally can't move into an enemy zone of control. And I say, continuing his, so he's pulling back, which is fine. He stepped through his units. So as he's written there, the rest of the corps close up with cavalry on the flank. Onto melee declaration. So as he said, the cavalry all declared their charge. The adjacent infantry will support. Okay, finally the 10th line and the 5th League Air will lead an attack against the Landwehr cavalry in the village. And he'd asked me to check the cavalry retreat before combat rules, which I will. The Prussian horse could not have retreated when infantry moved adjacent, as French combat units were adjacent to them at the start. So there's 2 parts where cavalry can retreat before combat. In this situation here, they couldn't retreat during the move because there was enemy units already adjacent to them, but they can retreat when we actually come to his melee, when it becomes my part of the turn, and I can retreat before combat before the actual melee there because he's only attacking with infantry. Blah blah. Few French activation completed so far to the Prussians for defensive fire and or retreat options. Right. So this was my return log back, whereupon I declared correcting the losses as I texted him and said, no, these are Prussians, so they can have 30 stacking. So as we shall see in this hex now, that 10 has been reduced to a 5. And in this hex, the 84th, yeah, that's been reduced as well. Right. So changing active formation, it was his formation that was active. So we've got to remember to do that. It's just using the VASSAL ability. So defensive fire. I haven't really hit anything so far, so let's see if we can actually hit. And defensive fire was from this hex, and I was targeting the infantry, and I rolled an 11. Remembering low's good, so that was, as I've written there, barn door syndrome. Couldn't hit a barn door, and that was my only defensive fire. Now, the Landwehr cavalry will retreat before combat, and it has to retreat 2 hexes. And I've written there, you may advance, but I will leave that to you. So I was leaving that option open, and that was it. That was all my log was one lousy shot and a fallback of the cavalry. So we then move on to Mark's next log. So he's written, Mouton's first decision is whether to advance after combat with one of the infantry regiments that threaten the cavalry. So in that situation, there to there, he can advance, but he can't do, well, we'll read what Mark actually says. Although it's a victory hex, I believe the French will decline for 3 reasons. 1, only 1 infantry regiment can advance, leaving them exposed. 2, staying where they are, they have mutual support from the 1/8 battery. So this unit here. And 3, the unit that advanced cannot declare melee again this phase, so he couldn't have pushed on anyway. So he decided to decline that option. So next we resolve the charge, hoping to break the enemy advance. It will definitely invite a huge response from the local Prussian forces, but the French lancers have a good opportunity to rout the target, as any QFT failure turns into an auto rout rather than just a morale check. So he then goes through the actual odds. The carrier 10 strength, doubled to 20 for the flanking charge, or 20 versus the 30, 2 to 3 odds, which is a +1. Remember, pluses are not good. The infantry will no longer take part due to taking losses, which we showed. My error with the Prussian stacking rule. They would make no difference to the odds now, as it would remain the same. French cavalry has a troop quality of 7, modified for 1 for Mouton. Prussian troop quality is the same. So the net modifiers are +1. The die roll is, so he then rolls a die, and he rolls a 9 modified to a 10, which ain't good. Okay. Well, not good for him anyway. The cavalry are caught out by the tremendous firepower of the infantry in line. The tremendous firepower we sort of missed, wasn't it? The barn door. But as they really got close, that's what the melee phase is representing, is the actual fight within really close range, not necessarily fisticuffs and handbags. No, it's definitely the effect of, as he's put there, the line. They are all reduced. The charge is shattered. As you can see there, I'll put that. So they've all been flipped over. And that is the end of the French activation. No end of turn die roll required. Okay. The leaders have got these little number 1s on to show they've been activated once. Remember, they can be activated twice in a turn for this scenario. So as he says, he's having a problem. Change that, but once I activate a formation, it will then change to these guys no longer being highlighted in green. So at which point he says bye. So that is where we're up to at the present moment. So I will end the action on the board and stop sharing, and then have a little end of activation chat. That's where we're up to. So it's over to me now to actually determine who I'm going to activate next. Now, I can't activate von Bülow. You can't activate the same formation twice in a row. So it's either going to be Blücher or it's going to be von Pirich. Now, I haven't determined yet which one I'm going to do. If I activate Blücher, he can do, well, technically he could do 1 of 3 things. But one of the things he could do, which is actually change orders, he can't do because this scenario says no order changes allowed. So he's down to 1 or 2 things. So he could activate 2 stacks of units within his command range for a further activation. So that could even be some of it would be some of Van Bülow's core because there's no one else close enough. Or he could rally those 2 units that are routed. Or I could activate von Pirich to start bringing him onto the board. I do know, because he activated Mouton, that the Guard will be activated next, the Imperial Guard. So, yeah, a decision. At which point I'll do the activation, do the movement, send the log off for defensive fire, etc. But that will be in the next episode. So I hope you've enjoyed what you've seen. It's the best way that me and Mark can currently play. Our work schedules don't quite match. We can normally get one Sunday to play or just a chat every other week, which for this kind of content doesn't work. So you decide to play this by email. It seems to work. We do chat a little bit on text, and hopefully I can get him on a shared video to discuss the current state on one of those Sundays. So that would be another episode. Mark's been playing a lot of the Tactics Napoleon. It's something that I sort of dabbled a little bit with him, and it seems quite interesting. It's another set of rules using Labatt maps and counters. So that might be something we'll investigate in another episode as well. Anyway, up to that point, thank you for watching. And I hope you enjoyed the episodes. If you have, please hit the like button. It all helps in the algorithm. And subscribe if you haven't done so already. And any comments, as always, much appreciated. So until next time, bye, Internet.